Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things you love. It's Monday, and it is the 10th of November. We are at the start of that dreary, teary, boring, dulcet 2-week international break where we have to twiddle our thumbs and just look into what might be rather than what we can actually do about things until we next kick a ball, which, of course, is against Arsenal on the Sunday after we return from this 2-week international break. Unfortunately, we start today's transfer news, views and clues with some sad news regarding another injury, an 11th injury to our list of Kolo Muani. He, in fact, fractured his jaw in the game against Manchester United. I want to start by sort of saying, first of all, best of luck with his recovery, as with everybody else. I also want to retract part of my criticism and my critique and feedback towards Thomas Frank from the weekend. I was working with the information that I had available at the time, and I don't remember, and I haven't seen anybody been able even to find the incident from TNT cameras where Harry Maguire and Muani came together. I've seen a still shot of the moment, but there's been no video footage of it. I don't remember there being any VAR. I don't remember there being any mention of it at half time. And so, we were all questioning, right, whether or not, Thomas Frank had lost his mind taking off Richarlison. And I myself went one step further and said, I think that there's a problem here. Thomas Frank's setting up his system that doesn't really allow for the forward players to have that much support. And then how much more can you really expect from the forward line if they're kind of isolated versus the rest of the team with the way that we set up at home, which was really problematic and frustrating for me. With regards to Xavi Simons, I still maintain that as an issue, and I'm not, until I see different, I'm no reason to change my mind. However, with Kolo Muani, obviously now we know he came off after playing an extra 35, 40 minutes with a fractured jaw. And obviously now I know that obviously was a forced change. So, yeah, retract that part of my criticism. Like I say, I'm always happy to acknowledge things when new information comes along. And so that's what's happened, right? And so I'm not so angry about the Kolo Muani change. In fact, I'm rather impressed with Kolo Muani for trying to fight on for, the best part of 40 minutes of football with a fractured jaw. I'm just very frustrated that I haven't seen and can't seem to find any footage regarding the incident to be able to, figure out whether or not it was deliberate or accidental, or should the cameras or the VAR stepped in and done something different than they could have done. But it is what it is. It is what it is. So he's out. Big problem. He's also part of four other first team players that would all make an argument to be starting in a Thomas Frank system. And I think you have to sort of give credit also to see how well we're doing in the league and in the Champions League, given how many players are out. 11 first team players out at the moment. And of that, you have obviously Dominic Solanke, who would probably be a starter. Kolo Muani, who when fully fit would probably be a starter, I believe, in the pecking order ahead of Richarlison. You obviously have no Mohamed Kudus at the moment. Hopefully he'll be back for the Arsenal game. And obviously we still have the long-term injuries of Dejan Kulusevski and James Maddison. So I think you have to also give a little bit of credit here when you think about that, and you also see the same issues around the pitch in the midfield. No Berghvall at the moment, no Archie Gray. There's issues at the back as well. So I think the depth that Tottenham have created sort of flies under the radar a little bit, because we never seem to have a fully fit squad to be able to choose from. But in a world where we did, players like Brennan Johnson, for example, would probably be right to the very bottom of the pecking order. And yet that guy is still a guy that scored in the Europa League final. I know he's not particularly everyone's cup of tea, but he also got, 24, 25 GA last season. And yet in a world where everybody in the first team at Tottenham Hotspur was fit, he wouldn't be getting very many minutes at all. And so I think that, like I say, there has to be some credit to the amount of depth that we have, where we can still put out a relatively strong team. In fact, I think a very strong team, despite having 11 injuries spread across the team. There's no department that is unaffected by it. And I think that it should be celebrated. But obviously we need to sprinkle in some superstars. We don't need to really build any more depth, so to speak. You now need to be putting the money towards 2 or 3 positions in big ways to really move the needle. And then Tottenham can, if you could fix the medical department injuries at the club, where these players are always injured all of the time, then I think Tottenham could really have a squad that has rotation ability and that has quality and depth, and with the right manager and the right tactics and everything else, then we can look forward to better things in the future. With regards to that, let's take a little look-see at some of the transfer news, views and clues that are out there today. Unfortunately, there's some really nice names on the list that I've seen, but most of them I don't really see as too credible. So first and foremost, you've got Dean Jones, which is talking a lot He's a transfer, quote unquote, transfer specialist. Is talking a lot about Tottenham today, and he is saying that Rafael Leao is back on Tottenham's list. Obviously, with Tottenham's relationships with Fabio Paratici, his relationships, his insights, and his maybe some of the leverage that he has into certain markets. A lot of clubs in Italy right now are under financial distress, and maybe Tottenham a relatively strong financial position, not just against those guys, but also in correlation to some of the clubs that we might be competing with. Then hopefully you would see that January is a window where, look, despite it being very difficult, there's obviously the time factor, 31 days. It's always a Mexican standoff, and no one really wants to sort of shoot until they're shot, if you like. And on top of that, you have this added sort of dilemma of the eighth and final Champions League or Europa League or Conference League game week this year, finishing, I think, on the 27th, I think it is, or 28th of January. So a couple of days later than it was last year. Last year, we already saw a massive delay in most of the business taking place until that final week, because most of the teams that were participating in those fixtures hadn't secured either a top 8 or a top 24 spot or whatever else. I think there was only Lazio and, from memory, Liverpool, I think, that had secured it from that they knew where they were going to finish in the top 8 from going into the final game week. So it makes those sorts of things more and more difficult. But like I say, relative to other teams, I think we do have some opportunities and some leverage that we can utilise. Do I think that Tottenham can sign 4 or 5 players and really fix everything in January? Absolutely not. Do I think that going after the sorts of level of calibre of players that we're looking at now, bearing in mind the depth that we have, and that we don't need to be going and spending 25 and 30 million pounds here or there, we really need some sort of 60 million pound and up level players. Do I think that those things are easy to happen in January? No. Do I think that most of them are already playing in the European competitions? Yes. So it is difficult, but if you can get 1 or 2 maybe, or some decent loans done, then it's possible. And as I say, in terms of the names that are on the list, I'm looking at them thinking some of these are deliciously in my sort of wheelhouse of what I'd love to see, but do I really think that they are realistic? I probably would say most of them no. As I say, Rafael Leao, he's not a player that wants to leave AC Milan. He's very happy at Milan. Milan, very happy with him. They don't necessarily have as bad a financial situation as, say, a team like Juve, but they absolutely do, relative to the Premier League teams, struggle financially. And he is one of their sort of prized crown jewels, if you like. And so do I find it realistic that he would go? I really don't. But listen, I've always said this, that the striker market in the summer was the wettest it's been for a long time. There was a lot of opportunity to go and buy players. We brought in Kolo Muani, who's a top player. He really is a top player. And we got him on a loan because, he wanted to go somewhere. He wanted to go to Juve. That didn't happen. Juve were kind of cop-blocked by their own financial situations and their FFP and PSR dilemma, having to get other things done. They brought in Jonathan David. They couldn't sell Dusan Blajovic. And so we managed right at the end to still get a top-draw player in a relatively wet market. The striker market now is a little bit drier. You've got Francolino Jew, who I do think will go somewhere. But he might end up going to somewhere like Germany first before he comes to the Premier League. I do think he'll end up at the Premier League. I know Everton are looking at him. For me, he is a player that Tottenham haven't been linked with yet at all. I'm surprised because he's someone that fits the profile in terms of age, in terms of what the club generally are looking for in terms of those sorts of things. Like I say, I would rather see Tottenham go out and spend the big money if they can. But the striker market is a little bit difficult to do that. There really is Dusan Blajovic, Jonathan David. These names are on the list today again. Those two, out of Juve, I think we can all agree that Dusan Blajovic is a high-profile player that comes with a question mark around his suitability, and also his salary demands are extraordinarily high for someone that really hasn't sort of smashed the ball out of the park that much in his Juve career. Wonderful player when he was at Fiorentina. He's still relatively young, same age, in fact, I think, as Jonathan David, who's another player who went from Lille to Juve and hasn't really played. I think he's got I think he's played 12 times for them this season, but very sparing minutes, 20 minutes at the end, 15 minutes at the end. I think he's got 1 goal and 1 assist. A top player, in my opinion, who's become far more well-rounded in the last 12 months of his time in football. Before that, the season before last, I was looking at him thinking he had weaknesses in his press. I wasn't sure if his work rate was top draw and his left foot had question marks around it. Now I think he's really worked on his left foot. He's more than comfortable to shoot from that side and puts the ball away. Last season when he was at Lille, he's done it at every level. He's done it at the Champions League. He's done it for Canada. He's done it at Europa League, the Conference League, the qualifiers, everything that he's played in, every tournament he's played in, he hasn't let the standard step up. concern him or phase him, and at the same time sort of moving his game into new sort of dimensions, I think is really interesting. But there's still a risk. He has gone to Juve, which is a step up from the Ligue 1, and he hasn't really broken through. So, but he is on the list as well. Be interested to see whether Juve are going to just flip him. They brought him on a free transfer, and they saw that as an opportunity to sell him at the next opportunity for, well, this is the question mark. What is the price? Is he 30, 40 million pound? Maybe he is a 35, 40 million pound, 40 million euro player. That would do a lot of help for Juve's finances. Would he be willing to come to the Premier League via that route? Would he be, unimpressed and dissatisfied with the fact that he's being used essentially as a mechanism, as an engineering tool to be able to just figure out Juve's own purposes? Would that, if that story does have legs to it, would that actually kind of materialize and manifest in a motivated player that wants to come away because he doesn't like that situation, feels like he's being utilized and used for the wrong reasons, and maybe bring him over? But did you see him as a player that you would have liked as a freebie, but not so much if you have to lay out a lot of money for him? Interesting one. Let me know your thoughts. As far as Dusan Vlahovic, similar sorts of, or for different reasons, but similar concerns just around the transition. As I say, the only time I've ever seen Vlahovic really drop into a different gear was when he took on Militao in a sprint from the halfway line for against Real Madrid in the recent Champions League game, and I saw a different gear. Right, I couldn't believe the speed I saw in that particular race because Militao's no slouch, but he doesn't do that very often. He's a very good player in the box. He's a box striker. He's good in the air. He can sort of very powerful shot, confidence and stuff as well. But are Tottenham, maybe you could make the argument that Tottenham are looking to do more of that stuff where you're whipping the balls and you get the ball out wide, double threat sort of mechanics, get the ball to the byline, search for a corner kick, search for a set piece. He'd be very useful in that regard. But at the same time, if they do whip the ball, if the interception or the tackle, the deflection for the corner isn't successful, is he going to have better options, better opportunity, better outcomes than someone like Richalison? For sure. But do you want to go and tie yourself down to a 4-year contract on somebody that's probably going to ask for £220,000, something like that, be a club earner, a club's highest earner, when he hasn't really proven it at the top level to justify those sorts of numbers? So again, it's not clean, it's not clear. Samuel Agahawa, I won't bore you, he's not on the list today, but he is another one that comes with problems. So the striker market for me is really difficult. Ivan Toney as well, another one. Right? Have we seen a player leave Saudi Arabia and come back to a top level team? Only Jordan Henderson, that went from Saudi Arabia to Ajax before he came back to Brentford. And we kind of know Jordan Henderson well enough, but he's, sort of dialing down on his career, isn't he? Ivan Toney, still young enough, 29 years old, still young enough, but has he lost a bit of the motivation? He's still kicking goals, literally and metaphorically, over in Saudi Arabia. He's scoring bags and bags of goals, but we don't really know the standard and the lifestyle. He's earning a fortune. How does that happen? There's complications around his taxes. If he was to leave and come on loan, I think that might be okay. If he was to move on a permanent deal and come back to the Premier League, that would be problematic. I think he'd end up having a huge tax bill, and there's no way that he's going to get anything like what he's earning there, here, or anywhere else in the Premier League. So there are problems with all of the striker markets, guys, and that might loosen itself. It might loosen itself up in the summer. It probably will loosen itself up in the summer, and so. Can you get by? Can you find a way to get by with what we have in the striker market until the summer? I don't think you can now with Kolo Muani out for the next 8 weeks. I really don't. Mathys Tel, look, a lot of pressure on Mathys Tel to step up. I'm so delighted with his goal. I thought his first touch was fantastic. I really did think that he was, he showed a little glimpse there of the things that we haven't really seen enough of from him. And he's a confidence player. I know he's someone that likes to pretend, in my opinion, like he's got an absolutely indelible character. Like his confidence can't be breached. But I think a lot of people who sort of pretend or who act like that are actually quite vulnerable to things not going their way. And things haven't gone his way. He's going to have to step up now. Him and Dane Scarlett are essentially our options alongside Richarlison until we get either one of Toney back or Kolo Muani back. And that's going to be difficult, right? So, but then do you want to commit? Do you panic buy? Do you commit to something that you're not certain of in January in the most difficult market where you're going to pay 30% probably higher than face value just because of the environment and the circumstances and the fact that the other teams need to go and make it worth their while, etc. I'm not sure. On the left wing, there are still a lot of options out there. I've spoken about Rafael Leão. I personally don't think he will go. Keenan Yildiz, another player that Tottenham are interested in, Liverpool are interested in, Arsenal are interested in. Apparently Chelsea are also looking at another left winger. I don't really know how they can possibly justify another left winger. They've got Jamie Gittins. They have Neto. They have Garnacho. I mean, I won't bother going through their squad. I'll be here all day. But they have so many options on the wing. Cole Palmer can also play out there when he's coming back. He'll be back soon. The idea of them bringing another one in is madness to me. But they are linked with everybody that we are linked with. Rafael Leão, Keenan Yildiz, Malik Fofana. Okay, he's got an injury. He'll be back by mid-January probably, though. But would you take the chance on him? Does he fit the profile of the way that the game is moving in the Premier League towards bigger, faster, stronger all the time? Possibly not. But you still can have space for tricky, nimble wingers as long as the overarching narrative of your team, I think, still has that physicality or doesn't neglect that side of the game, because that's how you can get run through. But for me, I like Malik Fofana. I think his injuries come at a terrible time, because I do think that we could have, or somebody would go out and get him. You've got Iliman Ndiaye, another player that Tottenham are linked with today as well. Again, according to Dean Jones over, I think he's working for TalkSport at the moment, but he's all over the aggregators. He's saying that Tottenham have identified Iliman Ndiaye as an ideal alternative to Morgan Rogers, who Tottenham are also looking for. Now, I'm not sure Everton will sell it Ndiaye for a lot of money. I speak to Everton fans. I speak to Mashina Joe, for example. I speak to other people. They tell me that Ndiaye has got all the talent in the world, but can be a little bit frustrating, a little bit lack of output, which I guess is one of the concerns that we have, or some people have, around players like Odegaard, players like Tel, players that we have in our team generally, players like Manuel Solomon used to have it as well. Lots of tricky, lots of flashy flair stuff. But the difference between the £20 million versions of those guys and the £100 million wingers is the ability to look up at the right time, pick the right pass, and get it to where it needs to go, or take the shot rather than passing it if the environment sort of calls for that sort of decision, and get those decisions right more often than they do. And Ndiaye, for me, I love him. I really do rate him. He can play off the left, but he does play more often off the right. He's more comfortable off the right. I think, though, he would be just as good off the left-hand side. He's been linked with us today, as it has, like I say, Morgan Rogers. Now, I want to show you this. I'm not sure if I showed you this. I think I did show it to you yesterday if you were watching. But the Morgan Rogers story is a little bit of a weird one for me. Like, these stats, don't worry so much about the actual... he's being compared to midfielders, obviously, and I think that Morgan Rogers plays a lot of his minutes more as just like a free roaming player. Now, don't look at so much around the actual, like, where they sit on the list, even though if you wanted to, you could say that he's very much sort of one or two dimensional, right? He carries the ball very much and then is very good at releasing passes for the shots. But these two overlays here are his last season in the pink and this season in the blue. And it's on a per 90 minutes, so don't worry about the amount of games affecting the scoreline. But you can see that basically everything that he was good at last year, he's not quite as effective at this year, especially carrying. This is in terms of percentages. Where do they fit relative to other midfielders in the top 5 leagues? Even key passes, still pretty good, but not as good. In every other department where he's weak, he's weaker again this season than he is last season. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure what the catalyst is for his relative underperformance. Is it because he's had his head turned? Is it because Aston Villa are not quite firing on all cylinders? Although they are, actually, to be honest. They're looking much better, Aston Villa. They had a bad start, but they're looking better and better. I just think it's a consideration that everybody is saying that Morgan Rogers is an absolute baller, and he is. Don't get me wrong. He's a fantastic player, but he's essentially half as good this season, statistically, as he was last season. Is that a concern, or is that just a moment in time that we need to kind of dismiss the relevance of? I'm not sure if Morgan Rogers is really... I mean, relative to what we have, I'd love to see Morgan Rogers. But in a fully fit squad, or a squad that has a Decky returning, a squad that will eventually have a Maddison returning, I don't think Morgan Rogers is going to solve us on the left-hand side. If you're bringing him in to play in the 8, that's not the sort of player that you need. You need a box-to-box player like I've done it before. I showed you the stats before. A Locatelli in a dream world. Go Juve, Paratici. Go get that done if you can. What a player he is. He fills up that octagon or that dodecahedron, whatever it is, that shape. Someone like João Gomez. Will Wolves sell João Gomez in January? Doubtful, because they're in a relegation battle and he's so important to them. But in the summer, would he be a player, especially if Wolves went down, would he be a player that Tottenham should look at? 100%. I think João Gomez has all of the earmarkings of a 6 because he used to play there before Andre came in, and now he's pivoted into an 8, a box-to-box player, and what a player that guy is. So I would be very interested in seeing someone like João Gomez. But again, he's not on the list today. He's just someone that I've just managed to waffle myself into a conversation about. Micky van der Ven, rumours that he's going to be targeted by Real Madrid and Liverpool right now, which is, I guess this is the sort of thing that happens, right? I was speaking to Luba about this. When he scores a goal like that, all of a sudden, if people weren't already paying attention, those teams that play possession-based football and that look and want the best and the most exciting players, like a Real Madrid, they're going to be looking at him thinking, we could go and get a Mark Gahey, we could go and get a Canate, we could go and get an Upamecano. All three of those are going to be free transfers. So if we're cash strapped, you go in that direction. If we want a new Galactico, a flair player that can do that sort of thing, is Micky van der Ven an option? Well, of course he is. And this is the problem, I guess, when you have a player that does those sorts of things. Think back to Gareth Bale, right? What happened when he scored that unbelievable hat trick against Inter Milan? That put him on the radar. And whilst it was the best thing we've ever seen, it was probably also the signal for the beginning of the end of the Gareth Bale story at Tottenham, because everybody in the world of football were paying more attention. On that basis, is that the reason why Tottenham Hotspur, for some wild reason today, are linked with Alessandro Bastoni again? Again, Football Insider Fraser Fletcher this time. I don't know who he is. Apparently he knows a thing or two. He is saying that Tottenham hold an interest in Bastoni. Fletcher stated that Bastoni is very happy at Inter and would only move for the right project, but the Premier League is something that interests him, and there is interest from England. Fletcher also said that Liverpool and Tottenham have both extensively scouted him, while City and United have both shortlisted him. He's another player that's very happy in Milan. Why wouldn't you be? Milan's a lovely city, right? You get paid enough money if you're happy there. I remember the whole debacle a few years ago when Conte was here. Wasn't he just setting up a bar or a restaurant or something that was going to be his wife's, pet project or something? And so that was part of the reason why he was never going to join. And look, he hasn't left, has he? No one talks about Bastoni coming to England anymore. What a player he is, by the way. Left-footed, left-sided, top draw player. If you can get him, you love him, but he's not going to come to Tottenham, in my opinion, anyway. But even in a world where Micky van der Ven stayed, he definitely wouldn't come. In a world where Micky van der Ven was to leave, Tottenham would need to replace Micky van der Ven with someone, but I just don't believe that Bastoni would be that particular guy. Personally, let me know your thoughts. Do you still rate Bastoni? Do you think he would come? Or are Liverpool going to come in for one of those two players? Possibly. It's increasingly likely that maybe they're going to really struggle with, relying on Virgil van Dijk for the rest of the season. He's 33, 34 years old now. Maybe Father Time is taking its toll. They need to move in a new direction as well with the impending dismissal of Canate. So in all of the areas that Tottenham are looking for help and support and getting sort of bites of interest, there's everybody else looking as well. Rodrigo, a player that I've mentioned sort of numerous times over the last 4 months. I believe that it's plausible that Rodrigo could end up at Tottenham. I really do. But if Tottenham are interested in Rodrigo and Rodrigo has an interest to come to the Premier League, there is also going to be interest from Arsenal and also going to be interest from Liverpool and maybe Manchester United as well. What about Savinho? Savinho hasn't done anything at Manchester City, really. He's barely played. Again, I don't think he's looked that great, though, to be entirely honest. I think that if we'd spent 70 million euros on him and he came to Tottenham, was putting in the sorts of performances that we've seen of him recently in a Manchester City shirt, I think people would be questioning that strategy or that transfer right now. I'm not saying that we don't want Savinho, but he was never really my favourite or my first choice either. Semenyo, there's no further news on him, so I won't bore you. Ademola Lookman, well, he has removed everybody from everything to do with Atalanta from his socials. He's unfollowed everybody at the club, I believe, and everybody that has a relationship with Atalanta. Atalanta, for what it's worth, I believe this morning sacked Juric, the coach. So all up in the air over at Atalanta. Could Tottenham possibly turn to players at Atalanta in this kind of in this particular period where there's a little bit of upheaval and uproar there? I think they might be able to. There's a lot of players at Atalanta that are still legacy players from the Gasperini system that might not be happy playing Juric ball. And now that he's gone, are they going to be happy again, or are they going to start again? What about players like Edison? He still hasn't left. Would he be the player that we're looking for potentially? What about De Catelier? There's another player that Tottenham are very much looking for. He's an attacking midfielder that can come in, can play off the left as well, can even play as a centre forward at times. Scalvini, a player that Tottenham were looking at in the summer that could come in as a centre back. There's plenty of players. I even like that Kosunu. I think he's on loan though, Kosunu, at the moment. But I think he might be at Leverkusen, is it? I'm not entirely sure. Either way, there's a lot of players at Atalanta and a lot of drama there. Could Tottenham steal a march? I think we have history with Atalanta with the Romero deal as well. So maybe there's relationships that Paratici could get on board there and try to take advantage of some situations. Anyway, guys, a little bit of speculation, but to me, there's lots of names out there right now on the left wing spot that there's also a lot of competition for. But if there was to be a Semenyo that was to move, if there was to be a Malik Fofana that was eventually going to move, or a Lookman or a Yildiz, I'd be happy with any one of those. I'd be happy with an Iliman and Die. There's 5 or 6 left wingers that are out there, maybe 7 left wingers that are all out there right now that would all wildly improve us. And if you're competing with Liverpool, Arsenal, and maybe one other Premier League team financially and on the draw to be able to track them, then there's enough players to go around for us to improve. So I think that the left wing spot should be the area that Tottenham focus on in January. And if possible, you get a loan deal for a striker that can see us through. But I don't think we should bite the bullet on a full-time striker just now, because I don't think that there is enough quality available in the January market to make it make sense. Let me know your thoughts. So sorry for the long one, but I hope it wasn't too boring. See you later. Bye.